All right, everyone. You remember about a month ago? Yeah, you remember when all the Bernie Sanders fans are saying, "Well, Bernie Sanders performs better in matchup polling versus Trump than Biden does, so we've got to elect him because he will be able to win." Well, that's no longer the case. If you look at the new matchup polling over the last couple of weeks, Bernie Sanders has steadily petered out, and Biden actually has been reduced a little bit as well. In some of the polling, Trump is already, despite being supposedly behind by a huge margin nationwide, he's pretty damn close to Biden's totals in places like Wisconsin. So in the most competitive part of the nation, if Trump were to gain another point of approval, he'd be riding even. And that's in polls that have a tendency, I hate to tell the Democrats this, historically speaking over the last few election cycles, tilt towards the left. Generally, not always, not invariably, and not by huge margins always, but generally tilt by a few points to the left. If this is the case, Trump is already ahead of where he was in 2016 in some of the most important state battles. Certainly Florida, it seems in Michigan, and definitely Wisconsin. If Trump wins those states, he's won the election. I hope people realize that the number of electoral points between those three alone swings everything. Once you compensate for all the states that are reliably red or blue, that puts Trump right about the number he needs to be at. And that's not counting other states he's potentially competitive in. Pennsylvania, we're assuming, by the way, that Ohio is even a swing state for the purposes of this, which is kind of out there. Virginia, North Carolina, technically, it leans red, but it's not reliable anymore. New Hampshire, potentially Maine. Some of these other states, Iowa, which Iowa is no longer really a swing state either. It's sort of like calling New Mexico a swing state. Okay, on paper it is. Technically speaking, it's a lean blue state, but it's a blue state. Trump's not going to win New Mexico almost certainly. There's like a 99% chance it goes down. Keep in mind, when we talk about polls of this type, we have to talk about certainty. Nothing's ever guaranteed. It's never a guarantee. It's always a maximum of like 99% certainty. I'm 99% sure that Trump will win re-election at this point because his opponents suck, don't know what they're doing, and right now aren't even able to campaign. Trump, by the way, is still at around, right now, 47% approval. He ticked down very slightly because of a new Rasmussen poll, but that could just be a fluke, or it could be systemically collapsing right now. It's always possible. Keep in mind the fickle nature of the U.S. public, or any public for that matter. But Bernie Sanders performs more poorly. Trump would already be ahead by, I think it was 3 points in Wisconsin against Sanders, a couple points in, what state was it? It was Michigan, I believe, significantly ahead in Florida. Bernie Sanders, one of the selling points of the sort of scumbag left YouTube crowd especially, has been Bernie Sanders performs better in these polls. Well, he no longer does. And that's not because of MUD-DNC, or Tom Perez, or corruption a la Nancy Pelosi. That certainly doesn't help. They're definitely corrupt. I agree with them very much on that. It's not because of that. It's because Biden looks inevitable, number one. Trump has risen in approval, number two. His numbers have significantly improved over the last month. Oddly enough, because of a pandemic. Who would have seen that coming? And Biden has just responded better with regards to coronavirus. Look, the response between Biden and Sanders, this is now the major national issue. Again, I don't think that Trump, Biden, Sanders, I don't think any of these people wanted a pandemic response to be the main issue. The Democrats are afraid Trump will succeed. They've got a good reason to. Trump wanted to talk about the economy, which now is in free fall, technically speaking, so he has to pivot and talk about disaster response. Talk about a weird election year. I don't think any of them wanted that. But let's look at the differential between the way Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden have responded to the coronavirus epidemic. Bernie's response has been to continue talking about the economy and American workers. To basically he only has like 4 issues that he ever talks about, so everything else he has to frame in terms of those. If he's talking about Women's Appreciation Day, he can't just strictly talk about women's rights or something. He has to talk about women workers. Have you noticed that? Every time Bernie Sanders has to respond to anything that's not part of his normal forte, not part of his normal sort of slew of issues, he always relates it to one of those issues. Invariably, look at any speech he's made, any town hall, any tweet. His tweets always go back to these issues. It's not coronavirus is bad, here's what we should do. It's coronavirus is bad because it's affecting disproportionately black communities. Coronavirus is bad because Trump is bigoted against the Chinese. Have you noticed this? It's like a broken record. Biden doesn't have this problem. Now, part of this is focus group related. Part of this is actually Sanders' honesty. He genuinely does not care about coronavirus. I truly believe that. He doesn't care about these wedge issues. He doesn't care about pandemics. He doesn't care about women's rights. He doesn't care about gay rights or anything. He's a socialist. He doesn't care about anybody except for himself and for Chairman Mao. What he cares about is trying to crack apart the current system and replace it for his Soviet-era masters. That's what Bernie Sanders wants. He's being very honest when he relates everything, therefore, to the only things he cares about, which all have to do, by the way, with money. It's very interesting how the supposedly gregarious, loving, kindly candidate does this. Biden, meanwhile, branches out. Again, partially because of focus groups. He's a neoliberal in the Clinton vein, of course. Partially because he's just not a broken record. He's capable of talking about other issues that he doesn't make part of his central platform initially. So he's done what Trump's done. He's begrudgingly, I think, made coronavirus one of the main issues. He wasn't even really talking about it 3 months ago. He was busy talking about other things. Now, of course, he's an orange man bad liberal. But then again, they all are. He can't campaign if he's not orange man bad at this point. If he were to say orange man did something all right, he'd have people jumping down his throat. In the general, by the way, he might end up having no choice but to do that if things go well with regards to the pandemic response. He might have no choice but to say, well, yeah, I give Trump credit, but here's what I would have done differently, or something, some deflection like that. I suspect that might very well be the case. Joe Biden doesn't have that disadvantage that Sanders has. Sanders is a fanatic. Now, in matchup polling initially, people were looking at Biden, and it wasn't that they were preferring Sanders for strength, it's that they preferred him over Biden to go up against Trump because of Biden's weakness. That's what was happening. Now, though, Bernie Sanders' main weakness, his glaring weakness, is showing. This is why he won't be nominated. It doesn't even matter that the fact that they've punted all of the primaries to June or whatever, and a lot of it will just be mail-in only, and we're looking at the possibility that the Democratic convention doesn't technically even occur. They're gonna have to put it on TV and an internet live stream. You're gonna have to have your convention with remote connections for the delegates and shit like that's gonna be weird. And if this were a contested convention, of course, it'd be out-and-out chaos because there'd be no way to actually have the convention. They would have to coronate somebody. By the way, they would lose the election. If there's a contested convention at this point, if Sanders gets just over the margin to keep Biden from an outright majority, I guarantee that Trump will win the election. It wouldn't matter how bad the pandemic was. It'll be a goddamn free-for-all. Can't even imagine what the Bernie fans are going to do if they don't get to show up and protest in Milwaukee. Again, every cloud has a silver lining. If I'm a member of the DNC right now, I'm very happy that there's probably not going to be a physical convention, because then the Bernie fans can't show up and get violent and make me look bad. Yeah, for them, the neoliberals are happy about that. Trust me, they're happy that the DNC will probably have to cancel. They're not going to be able to, they're going to hold a convention of 100,000 fucking people in Milwaukee during a pandemic. That's probably not going to occur. If there's a convention at all, it'll be later, and Biden will already have clinched, and it won't really matter as anything but a formality at that point. Weird goddamn election, but I'm very happy to see everything that I've ever said about Bernie Sanders proven right during this election. His opportunism, his ingrained weakness, his low ceiling, the fact that socialism is rejected by most Americans, everything under the sun. And I told people, I'm one of his constituents. I know him better than most American voters do because I live in his fucking state. I have to deal with his knockoff style policies all of the time. People didn't listen. They don't want to listen to a Vermonter about Vermont issues. How very, very sad and short-sighted they were. That's about all. Peace out.